Onto this story now. The remaining criminal charges against former KwaZulu-Natal Hawks head Johan Booysen are still under consideration by the National Prosecuting Authority in KwaZulu-Natal. Prosecutors withdrew racketeering charges in the so-called Cato Manor Death Squad matter, I should say, earlier this month. Now, Booysen has hinted that he could sue the state in this long-running matter. So he joins me now to discuss this matter. Mr. Booysen, thank you very much for joining us. So the state, or the NPA, to be more specific, withdrawing the charges of racketeering because it found that those were invalid. Are you suing the state? If so, what will the basis of your case be?
Corey, maybe I should just set the record straight. I was charged for racketeering, and I was also charged for one count of murder and the possession of an AK-47 and ammunition. Now, the racketeering charges had been withdrawn, and the one charge of murder emanated from an incident in Howick in 2009, roundabout. The High Court in KwaZulu-Natal had already pronounced on that case. Judge Gorvin, when I took the matter on review in 2012, held in the High Court that the charges of racketeering, well, both the charges of racketeering and the murder case was not sustainable. There was no evidence to link me to those offences. And at the time, those charges were withdrawn and later reinstituted by Advocate Sean Abrams. To come back to your question, is my main focus at this point in time is to focus on having those responsible for the injustices that myself and a number of other policemen had to suffer over a period of 7 years, is to get them to account for what they had done wrong. I've laid criminal charges against 4 of those prosecutors, and I believe that those cases are now with the National Prosecuting Authority for consideration. With regards to the civil action, I already instituted civil action about 18 months ago, and I'm busy talking to my lawyers to take that forward.
How much are you intending suing for?
Well, I don't think it's prudent to talk about figures at this juncture. My initial claim, and that was recorded in the media, amounted to 10 million rand. But I'll have to reconsider that amount for various other reasons. One of those reasons are that when I issued the letter of demand, I also claimed for potential loss of income. Well, since I left the police, I have been employed, so obviously I'll have to adjust my figures.
Yeah. Are you at liberty to tell us who these prosecutors, these 4 prosecutors that you've laid charges against are?
Well, I've never made any secret about it. You have Advocate Moipone Noko, the previous DPP in KwaZulu-Natal, between her and Advocate Sela Mahema from Northwest. They fabricated evidence, and I've said that in court papers. They fabricated evidence in a prosecution memorandum which they presented to Advocate Sean Abrams to coerce him into re-prosecuting me and reauthorizing my prosecution. The other 2 prosecutors are Advocate Sean Abrams himself, as well as Advocate Marshall Mogatle. Now, both those advocates made affidavits in the case, I think it was Freedom Under the Law and the Helen Suzman Foundation, when they took the decision to withdraw charges against Advocate Nonkobo Jiba. They took that on review. And a full bench in the High Court, 3 judges ruled that both Marshall Mogatle and Sean Abrams had deposed to affidavits, in other words, statements under oath, in which they said that it was Marshall Mogatle who withdrew the charges against Jiwa, whereas the 3 judges found in that court ruling that it was in fact Sean Abrams who withdrew the charges. So they'd lied under oath. So I've opened cases of perjury against him for that particular matter.
The manner in which the so-called Cato Manor Death Squad conducted itself at the time, it gained infamy, and you may argue it was as a result of the bad press that it got at the time. We know the Sunday Times today has withdrawn those charges or those articles. The question, though, still remains, because at the time that you and these other 26 fellow members were charged, it was about 116 criminal counts. Do you maintain that everything that was done at that time was done in accordance with the law?
Collie, we live in a democracy, and I've heard the earlier statement by Advocate Shamila Batoy. Now, arresting people is one thing, proving cases against them is a different matter. Now, I can only rely on the evidence that the state discovered to us subsequent to our arrest. Now, and I speak for myself, in my instance, I was mentioned in two of those instances. And that's why I took the matter on review. There was not an iota of evidence to link me to any offence. As a matter of fact, if you had listened to Advocate Nkasana when he testified at the Zondo State Capture Commission of Inquiry, the words that he used was there was not a shred of evidence against Booysen. Yeah. With regards to the rest of the members, I cannot vouch for them. All I can rely on is the available evidence. I wasn't there when those shootings took place. But the available evidence in the dockets, there's very little evidence that linked them to the commission of any offences. And that's why I maintained all along, with regards to the evidence against them, I don't believe that there is a case against them.
Do you maintain your innocence on the murder charge?
Absolutely. Well, let me put you in the picture. I'm sitting at provincial headquarters, minding my own business with management meetings. A shooting occurs 200 kilometers away from my office. I fly there in a police helicopter. I arrive there an hour and a half later. I do not even go on the scene proper. A newspaper photograph appears where I'm alighting from the helicopter. The next moment, the prosecutors, and that's what they said in the prosecution memorandum, this they fabricated, is that I landed there with an AK-47 which I planted on the scene. Now, I co-wrote a book with Jessica Pitchford, a journalist, and we chose that particular picture as the cover of the book, where I alight from the helicopter, and I've been trying to see where I'm hiding the AK-47. It's something that the prosecutors made up. I maintain my innocence. As a matter of fact, the actual shooting, in my view, was a justified shooting when the people the one suspect that had been sought for murder was tracked down, and the police attempted to apprehend him, and there was a shootout between the two parties.
A final question to you, General Booysen. In your testimony before the state capture inquiry, you said that the former police minister, Nathi Mthethwa, was responsible for, to quote your words, pressuring prosecutors to institute racketeering charges against you. The question I have for you is, what motive did the then Minister of Police, Nathi Mthethwa, have to do this against you?
It's quite a complex scenario. One of the investigations that I assisted with at the time, there were two legs of the looting of the Secret Services account. One that was conducted by Colonel Kobus Roelofse from the Western Cape under the command of General Anwar Dramat at the time. Then there was a second leg in KwaZulu-Natal that was conducted by a Brigadier Simon Madonsela. Now, Simon Madonsela and myself are very close, and I assisted him in that particular investigation. Now, one of the issues that had been investigated at the time was the building of a fence around the house of the then Minister, Nathi Mthethwa. Now, although he had been exonerated later on by the Inspector General or Auditor General, what he does not say is, in a previous interview that I had on 702 Radio, and this was his excuse, that he was entitled to security upgrades. He was entitled to 100,000 Rand security upgrades, which had to go through a certain process. The fact of the matter here is that the security upgrades amounted to 190,000 Rand. And the 90,000 Rand, according to the ministerial book, was supposed to have been reimbursed by him. So that was part of the investigation at the time.
So he would have pressured the prosecutors because he didn't like you investigating this extra money that would have been used for security upgrades, it is?
Well, those are one of the reasons. There were other political sensitive cases as well that I'd been involved at the time. You would recall we had the so-called Amigo case. 2 members of the legislature at the time had actually been arrested, Mike Maboyekulu and Peggy Ngoyeni. And there's a lot of pressure on Advocate Simpiwe Molocho at the time to withdraw the charges against him, and he refused. So that was also another investigation that fell under my supervision. And then there was another investigation that where the subjects who had been investigated had they were actually direct family of the then State President, Mr. Edward Zuma.
General Johan Booysen, thank you very much for your time. He is the former KwaZulu-Natal Hawks head joining us in studio this morning.